When Michael Johnston spoke at an education conference last week, he was booed and heckled.
I was invited to speak months ago and I agreed to do it. And actually the reason that I agreed to do it is because I don't think that there's enough talking across the aisles in education. And I was very keen to try to bridge the gap. I'm not sure that worked, but that was my intention.
Johnston has played a key role in drawing up the government's controversial draft curriculum. The thing that has been labelled contentious, racist, deeply concerning, absolutely ridiculous. But he wasn't talking about that at the Uplift Ed conference.
No, I wasn't. I wasn't speaking about that at all, actually. I was speaking about the state of boys' education in New Zealand, which I think is a much neglected equity gap.
But has this ever happened to you before, Michael? Because you've been in this sector for a long time. And
nothing like that has ever happened to me before. I've spoken at numerous conferences. I've spoken to the staff of numerous schools. I've spoken to, hundreds of teachers at kahuiako meetings, and I've always had, I would say, a warm reception from teachers and a good relationship with teachers.
So what does this say about the deep divisions in the sector over the curriculum? I'm Sharon Brett-Kelly. Today on The Detail, we'll hear more about that incident at the Uplift Ed Conference of Educators. But the outcry over the rollout just keeps rolling on. The latest over a decision to remove the Treaty of Waitangi requirement in schools.
Education Minister Erica Stanford says the treaty is the Crown's responsibility, not schools.
School boards should have direction, and we are giving very clear direction. You need to ensure equitable outcomes for Māori students. You need to be offering te reo Māori, and you need to be culturally competent. Being very clear about those things. But what is not clear is a conferred and unreasonable treaty duty that they are expected to decipher.
And the reaction?
The sector, both principals, teachers, boards and their communities were first stunned by this announcement, then horrified, and now I think they're just absolutely appalled. The removing of the Treaty of Waitangi from board responsibilities is out of step with society, with schools and with the global community.
Other areas of contention cross from arts to technology to PE.
If success in PE is measured only by physical output or athletic ability, we're going to leave behind those who don't see themselves reflected in that model. For example, is it critical for every 11-year-old in the country to know how to throw a javelin or a shot put?
All the little bits about te ao haka or the things are referenced under dance or drama or performance, not grounded, put at the bottom of the column. So really devoid of really meaningful Indigenous knowledge.
It's a major step backwards. In an attempt to make it what they say knowledge rich, they're actually dropping a lot of knowledge that we currently teach and learn.
The amount of content in this, it's too much. And the amount of time that teachers have to teach this to their students, it's not going to be able to be done in any depth. It'll be very superficial.
Newsroom political editor Laura Walters has written a lot about this.
There is a lot of pushback from educators, principals, teachers, as well as experts and researchers and people who are kind of, I guess you'd call education adjacent when it comes to this new draft curriculum or the release of these draft learning areas. I think there's been a loss of goodwill over the past couple of years between the government and the ministry and teachers and educators, and so it has to kind of be put into that wider context. There's been a lot of change there. To call it a education reform or overhaul wouldn't be overstating it. What the government is asking teachers and principals and educators to do is pretty massive, and educators don't feel like they're being listened to. They feel like there's a lot of politics or political ideology driving changes, and there's also been a bit of a disconnect and a breakdown in communication, amidst all of this. So I can understand, and I wasn't surprised by that immediate and kind of broad pushback from the sector, that feel like they're being asked to rush through these massive reforms at pace, that they're not getting the support that they need, that they're not being listened to. Meanwhile, they're dealing with the day-to-day, these classrooms with children who have high learning needs, high behavioural needs. You kind of have to put the pushback or the reaction into that context, I think.
Does anybody like what's happening? I mean, from the Uplift Ed conference last week, was there anybody there that you spoke to who said, well, this is what we need?
There may have been people there who think that. There may be people there who think that eventually, but I didn't cross paths with any of them. People that they got to speak to the conference, by and large, were critical, if not scathing, of some of the changes that have happened. And this might be an issue around communications, but when we're talking about getting an understanding and potentially winning over teachers and those in the education sector, I think the Minister of Education, Erica Stanford, did a really interesting thing. She set up what she was calling a curriculum roadshow.
We've got amazing international guest speakers, local principals talking about professional development, leading through change, implementing the new curriculum, and the Ministry of Education unpacking the new curriculum, talking about resourcing, professional learning and development, and how we're going to be implementing this over the next few years. This is important because we are undertaking a reform of the education system to make sure that students are getting a world-leading education.
Ahead of that roadshow, there was a pledge by a whole lot of principals to boycott it, to not show up. In the end, a lot of people did show up, and speaking to people who were in the room, in the different places they ran it, the day started off, it was very kind of a frosty reception, and as the day went on, the principals and school leaders who were there kind of became more engaged. I guess we'll need to wait over the coming weeks and months to see where teachers in the sector actually settles on this once they've had a chance to absorb all this material.
So have teachers and principals been a bit early with their reaction to it then? Are they lashing out before they even really know what they're being asked to do?
I understand why principals and teachers and educators are pushing back. So there's been a reduction in things like the number of mentions of Te Tiriti o Waitangi, changes to the Aotearoa histories curriculum, some of the changes to the relationships and sexuality education.
Previous guidelines were removed as part of the government's coalition agreement.
The draft framework covers relationships, safety and consent, and pubertal change and sexual health. Different sexual orientations and the term intersex feature, but transgender and other terms from the 2020 guidelines are not included.
The reaction to those parts, I think, are incredibly informed. Also, remember that some of these people would have been involved with writing some of the curriculum in these different learning areas as well, so they will know the details. So some of the pushback, I think, is really well informed, but I think that there will be more nuance and more context and a better understanding that will be able to flow through over the next couple of weeks. It's really unclear as to whether they will actually change their stance.
Is there general agreement that something needs to happen, that education of our children isn't up to world-leading standards, is the phrase that Erica Stanford likes to use?
The short answer is yes, New Zealand does have a problem. We are not doing well in our educational outcomes, but how do you fix that? And I think that is still the question that a lot of people are grappling with. What came out from that conference last week, the Uplifted conference, was to beware of policymakers and politicians who claim to have found a silver bullet, to claim to have found, the one evidence-based approach that will fix our education problems. There are no unicorns, there are no silver bullets in this space. It is complex, and a lot of the factors that drive or influence educational outcomes are those societal factors, making it sound as simplistic as introducing structured literacy or introducing a knowledge-rich curriculum. While that might be really helpful for some kids, these education experts at the conference last week said that's not going to fix all our problems and that's it's not going to work for every kid, and that's something that people should be aware of.
Remember, this conference, the Uplift Ed Conference, is where Michael Johnston was heckled. We should point out that it was organised by the Aotearoa Educators Collective, whose members have been pretty vocal in their opposition to the curriculum. So there was Michael, Senior Research Fellow at the New Zealand Initiative and a member of the Curriculum Coherence Group, talking to the audience about why boys fare worse than girls in literacy.
And at some point I talked about some literacy data, because that is a relevant issue for boys. They're well behind girls at every stage in reading and especially writing. So I mentioned those data. And I think I made a comment about the data about the phonics check that were out a couple of weeks ago, showing a really good lift over the first couple of terms in the proportions of kids after 20 weeks at school who knew their phonics. And somebody in the audience, who I won't name, but a prominent academic, made a rude interjection, I would say, at that point. And we had a brief exchange, and then I moved on with my talk.
But he wasn't the only one, I understand. There was a bit of booing and heckling.
I think that's an exaggeration. I would say that the audience was mixed in its response. I wasn't expecting a warm reception from that audience because of the political character of that organisation. But as I say, I was there to try to build some bridges. And I think, to be fair, after the talk, I had some really good conversations with people, and there were people who were open to that. But there were also elements in that audience who were probably always going to do that.
But does it also show the level of, I guess, passion around this topic, the new curriculum, the draft curriculum?
There's no doubt that there is a strong degree of passion there, yes. But, I mean, passion is not the same thing as reason.
Does it put you off wanting to speak in public? I mean, because you could also argue that your stance is not necessarily representative of what teachers want from education.
What's your basis for saying
that?
Well,
I'm just thinking, I mean, you're with the New Zealand Initiative, which is, is it fair to say it's a right-wing think tank?
No, I think it's what we are is, I would say we're a classical liberal think tank. We give policy advice to any political party who wants to talk to us. Chris Hipkins spoke at our members' retreat earlier this year. So it's not true that we only talk to the right-wing parties. We're willing to talk to all parties. And besides which, my work is on education, and I lament the fact that that is being used as a political football. It shouldn't be. So people can get distracted by the organisation I work for. They can get distracted by all sorts of things. But I just try to stay squarely focused on my best reading of the evidence and the policy that that evidence would suggest will help lift national achievement in our country. And I might say close equity gaps, because, if you want to see Māori do better, if you want to see kids in the high equity schools do better, then following the evidence-based practice is even more important for them than it is for anyone.
It's about our kids. Have a look at the content. Kids are going to be learning world history like the Stone Age, kings and queens, the Egyptians, dynasties and revolutions. Amazing new content and material they should be learning, and that's what we should be focusing on. Not who wrote it and whose ego's a bit bruised, but what are our kids learning?
That's just a reminder from the Minister about what the curriculum shake-up is all about. Back to Michael now on A Better Line, explaining his role in it.
For the last 18 months or so, I've been part of the Curriculum Coherence Group, which is a Ministry of Education convened panel of people, and our job has been principally a review role. We look at the documents that the writers produce and comment on them from the point of view of knowledge-rich curriculum design mostly.
Erica Stanford, the Minister, said in interviews that hundreds of people have been involved in this, redesign of the curriculum. So does it come to your group last?
It's hard to know what happens last, but we've seen various drafts of all the learning areas over time. So we don't sign it off, but we make comments and ask questions and so on.
Can you just be a little bit more specific? So it comes to the coherence group, and then what you review what has been recommended in this?
We see drafts of each learning area, and as I say, make comments on the design of it. So we're looking for a particular design of the way in which the knowledge and the practices fit together. For example, we have a look at the sequencing to make sure that it looks logical and makes sense. We've given some thought to connections between learning areas, especially at primary level, because one of the things that teachers are going to need to do, because there is a lot in the curriculum, is where they can find correspondences, say, between geography and science, so that they're not so that they can teach these things as efficiently as possible.
This phrase, knowledge rich, I mean, what does it actually mean?
That's such a good question. I'm really glad you asked. So it means more than just a lot of content, although there is a fair bit of content there. It means, that it's carefully selected to be representative of a subject or discipline, that it's sequenced really carefully. It's knowledge that is related to other knowledge, so that when children learn it, and this is an important cognitive principle, it's built on what they already know. So for that reason, when you look at the early year levels, often you will see things like starting with their family history, for example, and then building up knowledge about the past from there.
So what do you think of the reaction? I mean, widespread criticism.
Well, I'm not sure how widespread it is. There's certainly some people who are unhappy. I suspect that it isn't a majority of teachers or principals, but certainly there's a lot of noise generated by some.
Why do you say you don't think it's widespread? Have you had some positive
Well, I've
feedback?
talked to a lot of principals myself. I've been around the country over the last weeks and months and had a lot of conversations, and a lot of principals are very supportive and certainly think that something like this is urgently needed. I do think there's legitimate worry about the pace of change and the extent to which teachers are going to have to shift their practice, and they're going to need support to do that. So I understand that side of the worry, and it needs to be backed with the right resources. And I do have a lot of sympathy for the fact that the change is taking place quickly. But then again, every year that goes by without something like this, we're selling short another year of children.
So are you saying that you think it should be slowed down then?
No, I'm not saying that. I'm saying that it needs to have the right support so that it will be implemented with fidelity. And also, as Minister Stanford has said, it's not going to be perfect on day one. No one is expecting that. It will take time for teachers to find their feet with it.
Can I read out something? I think it was in the Post over the weekend, but it's kind of a reflection of what people have been saying since last week when the draft curriculum was released. This is Porirua Primary School Principal Linda Knight de Blois, and she said that after delving into the curriculum, she called it a joke. She pointed out that the science curriculum for years 1 to 10, which referenced 82 scientists, only 3 Māori, 3 New Zealand European, none from the Pacific, and 75 European, predominantly dead white men. That's quoting her. Mm-hmm. Then goes on to say that in the Year 4 Social Sciences curriculum of 81 learning objectives, 25 were about ancient Greece and Rome and none about the Pacific. And then the history curriculum from Year 1 did include New Zealand history, including Māori, as tangata whenua. But she's been quite specific there and pretty critical. How would you respond to that?
Well, first of all, I'd say that 3 out of 80 isn't bad when you consider that science has a long history. It's an international discipline. Look, the scientists that have been called out in that curriculum are the ones that made the great discoveries of the past. And, some New Zealanders and Māori are included. But in the end, that's a universal discipline. So it's got to be situated as the discipline of science requires.
There is quite a lot of concern, though, isn't there, about the New Zealand history element, that it's not getting the same prominence.
Well, I think it was out of balance before. Obviously, it's important, very important, essential for our young people to learn a bit about the history of their own country. And I think it actually the new curriculum does that better in the sense that it grounds it in the international history. So it starts with early Polynesian migration, for example. That's quite early on in the sequence, and then of course there is the history of Europe and other parts of the world where many people came from to live in New Zealand. So, and look, our young people aren't just all going to stay in New Zealand. They go out into the world. New Zealand is situated in an international context. We sell our young people very much short if we think that just teaching them about New Zealand is enough. It's required, but it's not enough.
So do you feel that this curriculum will address some of these major concerns about our education at the moment, such as inequities and the lottery of going to one school over another, poor standards, that kind of thing?
Absolutely. When you look at our international data, not only have we been declining relative to other countries and against ourselves for some time in many international measures, tragically we also have some of the largest gaps in educational attainment. And so we know that a knowledge-rich curriculum will address those equity issues. And the reasons that it will do that is, first of all, it sets expectations for every young person in the country is entitled to be taught. And secondly, it connects up the knowledge when it's taught so that they form, to use a slightly technical term, really well-ordered cognitive schema. So that's like how knowledge is organised in long-term memory so that it can be used to support things like critical thinking and creativity and problem solving. So knowledge is at the basis of all of these things. And it's one of the errors that's been made in the past sometimes with education is thinking that we can teach things like critical thinking and creativity in the abstract. We can't. Those things absolutely depend on knowledge. You can't be critical if you don't know anything about what you're being critical about. You can't be creative in a meaningful way if you don't have a great deal of knowledge. And I absolutely believe that having a knowledge-rich curriculum for all New Zealand children will help to address those equity issues.
How much do you think the debate, the discussion at the moment is politically driven?
It's certainly politically driven. I mean, a curriculum is to some extent a political document. I mean, I'm more interested in it being a disciplinary document myself. I just want to see it represent the knowledge that is going to best serve the young people of this country to prosper, to participate in democracy, to have a voice in society. Those are the things that are important to me. But I'm sure that some of the players here are politically motivated. That's okay. That's part of democracy too.
Do you think that the criticism that we have heard is not a true reflection then of how people in the industry are feeling about it?
I don't think it is. I think that, the teachers' unions are, for example, engaged in a pay dispute with the government at the moment, and these things become political bargaining chips. There's all kinds of things that go on. And I also think there's some entrenched ideology that some people hold that is going to take a while to shift. And again, that's all right. They've got their views and their beliefs, and they're more than entitled to express them, and they should do so. It would be good if they'd stick to the issues rather than attacking people, which has sometimes happened, especially on social media. But, that's part of it as well. It's all part of the cut and thrust. So I do think that a majority of principals and teachers, once they receive this document and start to use it, are going to find it really helpful.
The consultation will now run for 6 months, which is longer than usual, and the rollout will be phased in by 2028. That's all for today. The Detail is a newsroom production supported by RNZ and NZ On Air. This episode was engineered by Jeremy Ansell and produced by Gwen McClure. Thanks to Michael Johnston and Laura Walters. I'm Sharon Brett Kelly. Ka kite anō.